I am Shelly Alcorn. I'm the CEO of Ubiquity, and we've been very happy with the series. It's been uplifting. It's been interesting. We've had some really amazing speakers, and boy, do we have a treat for you today to finish off. You know, we started this series in light of current global events, and I kicked it off with resilience as a CEO. We've had all sorts of sessions on health and on stress and working with virtual teams, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, what we're ending the series on and looking forward to is really this idea of, okay, what's next? What's coming around the corner? What about the next normal, not just the new normal? It was a term I found from a recent article from McKinsey. And I thought it was a great way to orient our thinking around what's next, the next normal, because things aren't necessarily going to bounce back into exactly the paradigm we were in. And that could be a really good thing and some really positive outcomes. So the way we've structured this is I'm going to introduce my colleague here, Lori Silverman, and then we're just going to have a conversation back and forth. We both have deep experience working with virtual teams. Didn't want to do a canned presentation. We wanted to have a discussion around some of the key points that we think you need to be paying attention to as we move into this next stage. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Lori Silverman, who's the founder, CEO, and shift strategist for Partners for Progress, to join me today. I met Lori a number of years ago when I was on staff at the California Society of Association Executives, and I booked her to come do some presentations at our conference on business storytelling, which she is phenomenal at. And the moment I met her, it was just, I love her mind. I love the way she thinks. I love the way she has a real grasp on the undercurrents of change, not only how to make change, but the undercurrents behind why it's necessary. And so she has graciously agreed to do today. She's also prepared 2 micro courses for us, one that's currently up on our website, From Data to Insight to Action, which is all about big data, other types of data, how we bring it in, how we gain insights and wisdom on the things we want to do. And she's also preparing a second micro course for us on strategic thinking for work and life, because I believe, and she believes, we need to be strategic not only in our organizations and in our careers, but in our personal lives as well. So Lori, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, this is such a pleasure to be here.
And let's sort of jump in right now. You know, when we first pitched the idea of, there's a next normal coming if you're brave enough in this sort of business shift and idea, you grabbed onto it immediately. And give us a little introduction about what grabbed you about the topic, what you're hoping to accomplish today, and then we can dive into some of the other pieces that we built. So Lori, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Well, I think from my perspective as a strategist and a futurist, I have some concerns that we are so focused on today and what needs to be done today and the sorts of stressors that people are feeling and what I call the perfect storm that's actually happened. There's a perfect storm on the individual side, which is people were told to go home to do work. We also, at the same time, we sent their children home, and not just like their K through 12 kids, we sent their college kids home. And I have a graduate student for another university I work with who actually has his adult children at home with his grandchildren. So now they have like this population of 20. And then we said to them, oh, you can't leave the house. And we're making that longer, right? And if you do leave the house, oh, by the way, and you decide to go out and venture for food and other sorts of items, we're going to make it very difficult for you to find them, especially that toilet paper piece. But on the organizational side, I was thinking this morning, there's a perfect storm that's also happened, which is they had to get people home. And now I do realize there are some organizations, healthcare organizations, grocers, large retailers like Walmart and Target and others who are still open, or even the place that I go to donate plasma, who's working, as many hours as they can to get people in the door so that we can continue to keep our healthcare system running. that aren't where we're talking about right now. But for the most part, we organizations had to send people home, and not a lot of them were prepared for that. They didn't have the security and the privacy and the technology in place to make that happen 24/7 for people all over the world. Second, they have to stop the hemorrhaging. I mean, right now, organizations at some point are hemorrhaging money. Every single one of us is hemorrhaging money because we've lost business, or it's shifted, or it's been. I have a lot of business that's been postponed to 2021. And I say to myself, we don't even know what that next normal is going to look like, and you're all postponing it. And then we decided along with that they don't necessarily know how to collaborate as they get together, right? I mean, so they've got the people at home, they're trying to stop the hemorrhaging of cash. Now they still have to do collaboration in their business to make things go forward. And it's truly a very challenging situation for them right now. And so to me, I think as we look at this topic, and I want to take it kind of from like the micro view of the individual, if that's okay with you, have you chime in with me? To the
Mhm.
macro view of the organization and the organization's C-suite leaders. But I don't want to, as you said, there's been a lot of webinars, booklets, materials that have come out from experts and a whole mess of non-experts on some of these topics about what does it mean to work at home. But I don't want to deal with those. Kind of want to deal with the things that we forget, if that's workable for you.
Mhm. Oh, 100%. Because, there's plenty of how-tos and plenty of lists and plenty of tools for you to look at in terms of processes. What we're really talking about is this human impact. We're talking about this reorganization of business processes. We're talking about your organizational architecture. And we're really talking about, at the end of the day, unleashing human potential.
Yes.
And potentially reducing, now that we know that we can, reducing carbon footprints at the same
Yes.
time. Because just because this crisis is going on doesn't mean we weren't dealing with crises before this happened. Amazon
Correct.
rainforest, the Arctic, climate change, all of that. So all of that is still going on in the background. I know we're not talking about it right now, but this really is, when you have a shock like this to the system, it's difficult to go through. And we know
Absolutely.
many of you are losing people you love. Many of you are grieving over the loss of your daily routine, over the loss of your business potentially, over these things. And we want to acknowledge that and let you know that we feel that. But on the other side, there were shifts happening in business and shifts
Right.
happening towards this new thing that have been going on for years. I mean,
Yes.
and just to riff for just a second, I started working from home in 1995 with PC Anywhere and a dial-up modem of 28.8, woo, I was screaming.
I think I beat you though, Shelly. I was
Yeah,
working at home in 1988.
exactly,
We had
exactly. So
fax machines.
exactly. So you and I have been working from home all this
Yeah.
time. And we know it can be done. Ubiquity currently, our staff, we have staff members in 12 different countries. We have no office. So we are aware that this is possible. And not only possible, we're able to invest in people instead of buildings, or things
Right.
like that. So these things were coming, they have been here. If your first instinct was to look for a telecommuting policy, you're missing the bigger picture.
Right.
And so Lori, let's go into a little bit about what is this thing that individuals are really going to need to grasp and really think about as they take their next steps into this more virtual, maybe more humane workforce that we
Well,
might be able to create.
well, humane, and I also think more socially responsible is what you're talking about. So I want
Mhm.
to make some distinctions here first in terms of definitions. People are calling this work from home, but quite frankly, work from home is I work in an office and I go to the coffee shop one day a week. And we have given like a new definition to it today. So let's just hold that out here. And then I have worked for 100% a virtual company that's global, as well as a consultant for 18 months. And they call themselves remote.
Mhm.
Well, remote assumes that you still have more of a traditional organizational structure, same boss, right? But one of the things that's been going on in the project management industry or in program management is this whole shift, to projectize work and to product based work, to product owners. That is necessitating another shift to what people call virtual teams, but there really is another definition of virtual teams, which is, how do we stay fluid? How do we kind of have like a homeroom place that we go to? And then how do we have these teams that we flex in and out of to get our work done? So if you kind of remember back to when you were in school, you might have, not for all of us, but you might have started the day in your homeroom, or maybe you went to homeroom at lunchtime, right? So it was kind of like attendance was taken, we checked in, everything okay, we heard the announcements for the day in school, and then we went off and took all of our classes. I think the same thing is possible in the new next normal for workplaces. And by the way, I'm not talking anything new, because if you've been doing scenario planning on the workplace of the future, you know that Johnson Controls contracted with CBRE to create Smart Workplaces 2040. And they're already talking about this, where the workplace of the future is a luxury to come to. It's like a benefit. It's a celebration to come. And everything is done outside of that in new and different sorts of ways. So if we have those distinctions, then I think what we have to start asking ourselves, and some people I know are, but with the delays in coming back to work, because everybody kind of approached this as, oh, it's temporary. Oh, it's temporary. And I did a webinar 2 weeks ago with Jay Friedman from who's the CEO of the Goodway Group on, no, this is permanently indefinite,
Right.
or indefinitely permanent, whichever way you want to put the words, doesn't really matter. But this is not going away, folks, anytime soon. So you can like wish all you want. But for me, it's more about, what if it is the next normal? What if it is the next normal? And if it is the next normal, I think that there's a couple things from an individual perspective that we have to think about. One is, and I put up a post about this on LinkedIn about 2 weeks ago that got tons of comments. And it got like 6,000 views on it and hundreds of comments, where I said, I hate this term, social distancing. I absolutely abhor it. It's physical distancing.
Right.
When I started teaching graduate courses on a trimester basis in 2016, I started teaching online. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to understand how to foster intimacy through technology. And I don't do voiceover PowerPoints. That's why you and I are kind of here today, because we have to approach this differently. And I think your word humanizing is the right word to describe this. But how do I continue to bring in a human factor? How do people feel closer in an online sort of way than they do when they're in person together? And what I've realized over the last 4 or 5 years is it's possible to do that. So we can delve more into that. And then I think one of the underpinnings to this, though, is something I started writing about in 2004, a long time ago now, when I was living in Madison, Wisconsin. 4 of my entrepreneurial women colleagues and I had a column in a magazine for several years on a monthly basis. And when we set up the column, we said, we don't like the phrase life-work balance. Now, at that time, that was blasphemy. Right? I mean, it's like, I still have colleagues writing about it. Folks, there is no such thing as balance. I'm sorry. If you understand complexity, theory, systems thinking, yes, there's reinforcing and balancing loops. I get it. But in terms of our lives, and this is what this whole shift has pushed for us, is this. It's interconnected, it's interwoven, it's integration. And, it's the, I'm doing my laundry while I'm talking to you, or, oh, by the way, hang on, if my oven buzzer buzzes while we're on this phone call, or this call, I need to go, change the temperature or take something out or whatever. But it's this integration. And quite frankly, and I'd love to hear what you think on this, I don't think people are going to want to go back to balance.
No.
Do you?
No.
I
It was a myth to begin with. Like, I have always wondered, it's like, how did we expect people to walk into an office at 8 o'clock and punch a time card and literally leave their worlds behind? Like, you didn't have a fight with your spouse in the morning, or your kid was late for school, or there's stuff, you got to get the cupcakes done, or whatever it happened to be. Like, that that whole thing was a myth to begin with. And not only that, but we created this separation between our personas. We had the
Yes.
work persona, we had the
Yes.
personal persona, we had the family persona, and that's fine. We all have different faces that we wear in different situations, right?
Right.
But the thing is creating that type of intimacy through technology requires psychological safety
Yes.
and more authenticity than we are used to. So for example, one of the reasons people are always like, why don't you mind that your cats interrupt your broadcasts? And I'm like, because like 10 years ago, I had to let go of being embarrassed by that and just embrace it as, that's part of who I am. And we've talked a good game about authenticity. I loved like the last couple of years where it's like, our brand needs to be authentic. Like that's news. And then we just go and then we don't allow each other to be authentic. Well, guess what? Over the last 2 weeks, I am sure I have been, even you have been, I have talked to execs around the country. They have been more authentic with each other than they have ever been. They are crying, they are talking to their kids and putting themselves on mute during conference calls. They're beginning to understand that integration, but that integration, overcoming physical distancing, requires communication on a whole different
Different
level,
base. Yes.
vulnerability on a whole different level, and for leadership to create that psychological safety so people can do that, express themselves, and still get back to work and still be productive. Like Ubiquity didn't slow down. I mean, oh
Right.
my God, if anything else, we punched the accelerator
Right.
pedal the Monday after the doors closed in the US because we understood that we needed to get out there and get going. But you know what? It didn't happen without a staff meeting where we had to check in with everyone and say, yeah, how am I doing? I don't know how I'm doing. And the minute you can say that, suddenly you lift that burden off yourself. And that's where productivity and creativity comes from. If we unburden our people by allowing them to be who they are and almost requiring it in a way, and
Yes.
that's key. That's an absolute key.
Well, I think it's become very raw, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that the question we have to ask ourselves is, why would we want to go backwards?
Yeah.
Why would we not want to have this emotional, social, spirit kind of soulful connection with each other that these past few weeks have brought us all the time? Now, that means, though, that we need to give people more emotional intelligence skills, perhaps, right? If they don't come
100%.
with, right? If they don't come with the
100%.
EI pieces of that,
Mhm.
but the, why can't we just be who we are? I remember many years ago, I used to work in a hospital, and this takes me back to the early part of my career when I was internal. And I used to wonder when I walked in the door whether or not I had a zipper at the top of my forehead, and I would unzip myself, seriously. And this person would walk in, and then when I'd walk out the door, I'd picked up the zipped off part and I'd zip myself back into it. And I always said to people, if you really want to know what people are like at that time, go look in their cars,
Right.
because everything that is meaningful to them is sitting in their cars. And I think that's the other piece of what we're missing right now is people are starting now that they've been home for a week or two. And some actually, we're still in this transition and shift around the world, right? We're doing this in waves. There's a whole piece around meaning making,
Mhm.
that people are starting to ask on an individual level or with their family members or with their friends, significant others, which is, what does this really mean? And what does this mean to me as an individual? For leaders, it's, what does it mean to my team, or what does it mean to my organizations? What does it mean to the planet as a whole? That's what you spoke about at the beginning of this conversation. And I think that that's where we can make great strides from an individual relationship perspective or a group relationship perspective with each other. And that even if we're talking about virtual teams for a second, it's, we have got to start allowing time to make meaning out of this, and to
Yes.
start saying, what are the implications? What is the so what? Do we really need to do that anymore? Or is there a different way that we can approach this situation because of what we're gaining as a result of this experience for each other? So I think if we, kind of look at the team leader implications of this,
Mhm.
it's how do I deepen those human connections? You know, my clients, and I do this, I tell people I live in a 44-year-old building on the strip in Las Vegas. It's the first one, you know this, that was built by the mob. And it's all cement walls, and these walls have stories in them. Let me tell you, I live in the developer's unit. So you can well imagine what happened in my unit. And I tell people my phone dies on phone calls. So I make it mandatory that we do video, just like you and I are doing today, where we can see each other. And I do not allow people to opt out. And I think the same thing is true right now, because you have no other way of knowing what's going on for people until you can see what's behind them.
That's right.
And get a sense of what they look like physically, their coloring, their what they're and I don't care so much about what people wear, but I do notice that to say, did they actually get dressed today? You know, are they still in pajamas? And I'm actually okay with that because I know what that's like. But I have to get a sense of what's going on for them. That means that you better start having those daily check-ins with people, right? And doing those video check-ins with each other. And truly that I'm checked in, you know, what happened to you over the evening or whatever, the last 12 hours we weren't together or 16 hours we weren't together. And, you know, I'm checked in. And, you know, even with my client, one of the things that I learned to do with them, and writers do this, by the way, if you're in a writing group, is we will often do a Zoom call and nobody will talk. We'll just we'll be on mute and we'll all be working in the background. And then if one of us has a question, we unmute ourselves. So we still feel like we have community. And I think that's the big piece too. How do I still feel like I'm part of a community and I don't feel that I'm disengaged from that? And of course, there's lots of technologies to make that happen. But you as a leader have to be 1,000% intentional, 1,000% intentional and deliberate about this. And you have to model that transparency and that rawness. What you don't want to do is what I saw this weekend. I was on my phone looking at some of the apps, and the CEO of a very, very large company that I have an app for had a video on it. And he did the video in his home, but he read the words. And I'm like, seriously? Seriously, you are reading to, you could not give this impassioned, heartfelt, you know, sort of conversation, you know, as opposed to the CEO of Marriott. And there's a video of him on YouTube. And
that was so well done.
Brilliant.
So well done.
And, you know, Arnie is, you know, he's been ill and he talks about what is it like to see me with no hair, but this, I have loved him from the day he endorsed my 2006 book, which is how I met him. Nobody usually knows that about that. But it just humanness and rawness. And is that what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, 100%. You know, and it's what's so great about it is that's how you develop the trust you have to work in a virtual environment. Like, this doesn't happen just by virtue of a staff meeting, you know, on Monday. This building trust with people to where you can be effective with a team in a virtual environment requires that you're connecting with them as individuals, that you're connecting with them as a group, but it's also about switching your attention to results, switching your attention to the fact that they're human, the fact that some of us work better during some parts of the day than the other, the fact that what we're really focused on is the results that we're producing. And I often say, I don't care if it takes you 2 hours to do it or 15 minutes to do it. I want it done excellently. I want it done well. And then we move on to the next thing. You know, that's the important thing. If I was, and managers who are used to managing, they're not leading, but they're managing. You know, they've kind of gotten this, you know, that old movie, you know, The Office Space or whatever it was, you know, where you have the manager walking around and about those TSP reports, you know, it's like, that is not what this is about. And that's hard to get used to if you're really used to managing effort versus managing productivity. It's different for people. And I've already seen it I've seen execs kind of grinding their gears on that, going, well, how do I know they're working? And I'm
Right.
like, when you see what they send you, like
Correct.
it's not rocket science, but it's very foreign to a lot of managers. And if you're going to effectively work with a team, of course you need certain hours where you get together and you talk and you do things, but you've got to shift to a results oriented workforce, because it's just not sustainable in a virtual environment to manage every minute. It's just, you have to manage by results, not manage by minutes.
Yes, and I found that to be true of my clients who primarily move in this way, but I want to tie together what you've just said with the psychological safety piece. It's
Mhm.
exactly why, when the research was done at Google around why are smart people when they come together in teams still not smart? Like what is that? And there's a brilliant New York Times piece about this, and the concept of psychological safety, which had been around for a while, actually came to the forefront for all of us to know about. That's that is intimate. It's not just the trust, right? It's the openness, it's the
Right.
transparency, the authenticity tied with the accountability. But that means that the way you lead has to shift.
Right.
That means that you better start spelling out the specifics of what is it that we agree to in terms of our expectations of each other. What is it that I think you're going to get done? And to get started, that's why people have to have these check-in meetings, I think, for teams. And to me, I do them all the time when I'm working with groups like this that are completely virtual. It's, what are we going to get done today? What did we get done yesterday? What problems did we run into? And where do I need assistance? It doesn't have to be a lot, but it's just enough to get us a sense of where are we and do we need to shift, because that's an agile piece. Where do we need to help out someone because something is really not going well, versus staying in our swim lanes,
Mhm.
so to speak, and that we can come together and then get work done faster. So
Mhm.
to me, it's about a lot more coaching conversations
Mhm.
that are happening on a weekly basis. And if you say, well, I've got 80 people and I can't do that, Lori, well, then you've got to really rethink your own role.
Mhm.
I mean, you've got to start touching base with people, because you can't let them go a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and not check in with them. I mean, that's not going to work anymore, because who knows what will have happened in that amount of time. For all we know right now, they could be in the hospital,
Right.
right? On a ventilator.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
seriously, I wonder that, like, when I leave messages for colleagues of mine and they don't call me back in 24 hours, I'm like, did something happen to them?
Right.
Because we're now tuned in that there could be a crisis that's preventing them. But
Mhm.
but this is going to maybe finally cause us to shift our employee performance management systems. I mean, please, could that happen?
Please,
Um,
can we please do that? Yes.
but
Yes.
there's that, but there's also what I've learned from my clients over the years is you have to do two more things.
Mhm.
Zoom has been wonderful because you're probably going to have to video meetings.
Mhm.
And the reason you're going to do that is not because you yourself might look back at them, but someone may have missed them or someone may have come in late. And you need a recording of the meetings for people. I mean, to me, it's even better than having someone who's taking notes, right? Because I can go back, but you still need both. But you're going to have a tremendous amount more documentation about the work. And you're going to have sites, SharePoint sites or other sorts of places where people can go to see the repository of the work that we're doing that is easily accessible and that can be easily updated.
Mhm.
And then you have to plan for the unexpected, because I did this. I was doing an environmental scan for a client. We were looking at the year 2040. And we were doing this 2 years ago. It's a government agency. Thank goodness they did that, because it's helping them today with what's happened.
Yeah.
And we were putting documents into a SharePoint site, thousands of documents, and someone just, it was gone. It was deleted.
Oh.
It was completely deleted. It was
Oh.
like, and there was no backup of it. And someone, I have no idea why that is, but this is just the calamities that can happen.
Right.
And and they were like freaking out. And I said to them, I said, oh, I said, I said, I'm very forward thinking. I'm always spending time thinking about the future, but I'm also in some ways old school. And I said, I just happened to have printed out the cover page of every article. And
Oh
so I
my
was able
goodness.
to repopulate the site.
Oh my
I
goodness.
know, and it was just like, they're like, "Really? You did that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I ca" so you have to have these redundant systems, and I know that might not be the appropriate example, but it's the redundancies and the structures and things to allow people not to have all of a sudden go on a paralysis or a permanent pause here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
With each
exactly.
other. And so I think that in some ways, leads us into the variety of tools that you need to use here, both for your meetings. I think to me, the biggest challenge, and you might feel this as well, is how do you still have those brainstorming sessions? How do you still have those really creative strategy sorts of sessions? And you got to start looking at tools. I have a client who uses Fun Retro, another client who uses Lucid Chart, but you've got to start looking at tools to allow that to still happen as though we are literally face to face. And I know for me, I can do 100% of my work, my strategy work, my work in collaborative, data informed decision making, any of my work, just like we're doing here today. It's possible to do this. And
Yeah.
I think we have to get over that shift in our mind. But what you said earlier is you kind of got to give up control,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And that is a hard thing to do. And just as a moment of authenticity, I don't feel like I can ever do enough to talk to my staff. Like, just I'm just going to be flat out honest. This is a challenging environment to work in because I have work too, right? Like
Right.
I have things, and my brain, I can get caught up in projects and da 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 da. But it is a conscious, intentional, put it on the list of things you've got to do is stay in contact with your people. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you, the best thing that we do is just a WhatsApp group, to be honest, because we can get people like within seconds on WhatsApp to just continue that flow of conversation throughout the day versus we're having a virtual meeting at 8 and then we're going to do it before lunch and we're going to do it at the end of the day. That's not what we're talking about. The
Right.
daily burdens are like those 5-minute meetings that people talk about, those
Right.
5-minute standing meetings I used to do
Right.
when I was in an office, to
Yep.
call everybody in for 5 minutes. What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, let's go. And then that flow of communication and information for us, works great on WhatsApp. For other people, there are other things out there that would work for them.
Right.
But it really does take intention and balancing those things. And yeah, a lot of times I may not check in with a staff member because I trust them, because I know what they're doing. I know they're going to let me know if they have a problem. And that's the thing. It's like, if I hope they feel safe. God, they're probably watching this broadcast. I don't know, but I hope they feel safe enough to where if I'm leaving you alone, it's not because I don't care about you. It's because I figure that things are fine. But I hope I'm a safe place to go when you run into an obstacle and you go, can't get around this, don't know what to do with this, I screwed this up, blah blah blah. I don't care, it's a mistake, let's just fix it, let's just move on. But that, again, that psychological safety point where that flow has to be a balance of trust, a balance of how much you communicate, and then a balance of people feeling safe enough to come to you as a team leader when they have something that they need to say and to do,
Well, yeah. Well, one of the things that I do, and I actually thought about this on Saturday because my graduate class is entering its 12th of a 15-week trimester. I share a lot of personal stories about me. And I know that I thought to myself as I did my video on Saturday, I wonder what they'll think when they watch this, about me. But what I've come to realize over the years, because I've done so much work in especially the role of story in crisis and the role of story in creating meaning, is that if I do not model that for my students and make those sorts of communications, they will not have them with me. I mean, no matter how much they might like me, how much they might trust me, it does not matter. Is that I have to take the first step. I'm the one who has to be the most vulnerable. And so I do sometimes, there's this fuzzy line, right, between, what we're supposed to talk about and what might be a little bit more private and then what might be intimate. I don't ever cross that intimate line, but a lot of my private stuff I do tell people about because they're not going to talk with me otherwise. And then I do get the emails that just says, hey, this happened to me, in the last day or two, or hey, this is going on and I can anticipate it. And there's empathy and compassion that comes through in those as well.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. 100.
Absolutely. But with the work that I've done with organizations, like I said, that are fully remote, global, one of the things that they've learned out of this from a team perspective is that when they do come together physically, it's a complete and utter celebration.
Oh
And
my God.
really,
Yes. When we
right?
when
It's
we get in a room, it's like, it's you, you know? Exactly.
Yeah, people will say to me, "I didn't realize you were so short. I thought you were taller." I'm like, "Really?" But, I mean, now we're supposed to be doing like the physical distancing, so I'll talk about this in the past, but,
Yeah.
the amount of hugs, the amount of love, people don't wanna go to sleep when they're physically together. If they're together for a few days, they wanna use every moment of the 24 hours to engage with each other and to actually be face to face. And what those clients also have found is that employees will often vacation together
Yeah.
because they want more, right?
Yeah.
They'll like show up. I do this for LinkedIn. I'm a company of one, and I have lots of contractors who work with me. But when I'm traveling, as I should be, I should have been today. What is it, Monday? This should have been my London day. I was
Yes.
finishing up a keynote, supposed to be keynoting in Brussels, going to Bonn and Cologne for the weekend, and then showing back in London for some meetings. I find that people more readily agree to connect in person, that they like want to show up to meet, even if we've had lots of these conversations like you and I are having, because we actually get to break bread together, right? In a colloquial sort of way.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the important piece too, is to recognize it isn't like coming together doesn't ever happen. It does happen in this next normal, but it's celebrated and you have to allow time for that.
Right. Exactly. It's like, it's not, it used to be, okay, we work, and then we're gonna go away for 2 days, and we're gonna have a strategic planning retreat, okay, and then 8 o'clock we're gonna start, and then we're gonna have the flip charts, and then
Yep.
that's really not what we're talking
No,
about. What we're talking
no.
about is this flow that happens all the time, but then when you are together, it's unleashing creativity at another level. It's
Right.
building that time in for socializing. It's building that space, the white space in the middle of connection and community, right?
Right.
To really get that engine, really going. And I think that that's, whenever I've gotten a chance to be in a room with my staff members, it's it's like being with a long lost friend, right? It's like,
Yeah.
even though we may
Yeah.
talk all the time, it's the in the room. And so yeah, we're never, just like, remember back when virtual became a thing and people were like, no one's ever going to go to a conference again. No, no, that's
No.
not it. That people are always going to want to meet, and like you said, break bread and share a glass and do those things, but you just do it differently. You
Correct.
have different expectations for those times than you had before. And if you can do that, you can really unleash the pent up, kind of creativity and connection that's there. And man, you're energized when you get back to the office. You're just like, yes, we can do this, and that's, and yes, the time will come again where we can do that. But wouldn't it be great if we were integrated in our lives so that when we came together, we could we could focus completely on the people that we're with? I mean, if I'm 40 hours a week away from my kid and away from my cat and away from my laundry room and whatever, and then you make me go to offsite, or then you make me go to a conference, do I really want to go to all the sessions? Gosh,
No.
no, I really
No.
don't,
No.
it's like,
No.
so if we were more integrated on this consistent basis in this next normal, the in-person experiences are going to be so much better, because we've had, it's instant escape then from
Right.
life, and
Right.
now we, give us a chance to live it, will you please? I mean, that's
Right.
one of the reasons why I became a consultant in 1995, and I became, and I was a consultant again in 2010, because I didn't want to give up that space. I gave up enough space with my kid, and enough space, I wasn't able to pay enough attention to, family, and because of that whirlwind I was in. And I intentionally tried to build that space into my career and take big risks for that payoff. Oh my gosh, what if it wasn't a risk? What if it wasn't a big risk? What if this is just the way work is done in the future? Oh my God, wouldn't that be awesome? You
Well, and
know?
I think so. Let's shift this to the C-suite later for just a second, right? We know that. So here's, I think, the dilemma. There's the present moment, and people right now, for all phenomenal reasons, have to be focused on the present moment, right? I get that,
Yeah.
because there's so many things that have to be handled right now, and the decisions cannot wait.
Right.
And minute by minute, with the way the financial systems are changing, the healthcare situation is changing, and so on, we have to make immediate decisions. And there are some people who are thinking about the next step,
Mhm.
right? But the next step for them is, what they're doing is they're saying, oh, in 2 months when we get back to work, this is what we're going to do. Or in a week from now or 2 weeks from now, this is what we're going to do. I
Mhm.
want to talk about the step after next,
Yes.
because that to me is really the crux. And I think that, and I want to use just an analogy here for a second before I dive into a little bit about some of my thinking, and also kind of where McKinsey is right now on this, because I'm a little concerned with what they're suggesting that people do. Um, I've I've had the opportunity over a number of years to write books, and one of the things that I learned, it took me to my third book to learn it. I'm not a quick study here. Was that there is this sequence that you go through with books, and I learned two things. One is that you title the book before you ever start to write it. And number two is that you market the book before you ever start to write it. Now, most people put those things at the end. I'll deal with the title when I'm three-quarters of the way through, and I'll get to the marketing when I get to the end of writing. But it's taking the end of the process and putting it at the beginning.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that people are suggesting we do later on is really one of the things we need to do at the beginning. And that is, we cannot return. We're not going to return to the way things were. Okay. So we can grieve that, and we can start to make meaning out of that. And there's lots of consequences to it. But we have to start the reimagining process now. Because if I do not start it now, how do I know that I need to get my old supply chain up and running? I mean, I don't know. And this is a perfect pivot time for organizations. But I'm not so certain that people are going to take them. And that's my real concern here. Is, will you take the time to do the strategic thinking today that is required, so that you can say to yourself, well, what are the various scenarios? The first thing we've got to start playing out is, what are the various scenarios that we could be walking back into? And it's not just walking back into in 2 months or 3 months, but it's walking back into 2030, 2035, 2040. Um, I've done enough strategic planning work with organizations. I remember a time I was working with the American College of Veterinary Pathologists. This goes way back, like 2002 maybe timeframe. And they said to me, "We only want to do planning on a 3-year cycle, Lori. That's it, 3 years." And I said, I beg to differ with you. I don't do 3 years, because 3 years is like tomorrow."
Mhm.
And they said, "Well, we'll make you a deal. Do it with us. And if we come to your realization when it's all said and done, we'll hire you for the next round."
Okay.
And they did. They did. So for me, unfortunately, this coronavirus was nothing new. That I knew. But what they realized was that in the early sessions that they did with me, they missed doing scenario planning. And what they said, their eyes were opened, because when they put themselves in a future year and then they looked backcasted to today, two things happened. One was, they could anticipate what the future was going to be about, and they could position their business in very unique and unconscious ways to kind of deal with that. But then with the backcasting, they could actually start to track perking signals in the external environment to say which of these multiple kinds of scenarios is playing out,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But then a third piece happened. We created strategies that were more robust, that could live in a variety of different scenarios. That's the first thing.
Mhm.
But I think for organizations where you need to start right now with this reimagining, and you can tell me from your experiences, Shelly, is I think we have to start to assess the whole of the organization.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like we have to look at the future, and then we need to go back to our organization and saying, on a whole bunch of different dimensions, what is it that we might need to shift and change? Because what we're walking back into is going to be different, or maybe we want to be the leader. You
Right.
know, I had somebody tell me last week that they couldn't give me the name of the company, but I'm pretty certain I know who it is. That it's a company that is, you just kind of figure things out, and the person, is, who the person is. An organization that is the stock market just loves to watch. Um, but with things being all this chaotic, the stock market has taken their eyes off the ball with this company. And the leaders were very astute and said, now is our time. Now is our time. Those strategies that we couldn't quite implement because the investors were on our neck all the time about stuff and watching us like a hawk with our financials. Well, we hoarded a bunch of cash. Now we're going to go we're going to go do them. We're going to go do them now while they're not watching us,
Yeah.
because they are actually, this whole situation confirmed for us that these are the right things to do. So
Mhm.
let's accelerate them during this time. Let's not put them off.
Right.
But that's a different mental model, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah. That's that's the thing. It's like it's amazing to me how organizations are very linear, right? Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and we're going to go back to work on this date and everything. And life, number one, has never been like that.
Right,
Otherwise, a company would
right,
never go out of business ever for
right,
any reason, coronavirus or okay. But there's also this we've got to be more expansive about how we think about time. And it comes down to those scenarios because you've got to have a wide funnel of future at the front, right?
correct.
So there's
Yes,
a wide funnel of future here, and you've got
right,
scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. And as you move through your linear space, your choices get a little smaller and
right,
your business starts to tack, right?
right,
But then it's like a wormhole because you can only go so far down that tacking and so far down that narrowing before that wide future has to be in your sights again, so
right,
you can begin the process over. So it's an iterative strategy process that begins with imagination at the front,
correct,
not at the end. And that's
correct.
the thing that has always driven me crazy about strategic planning. Number one, most of the time it's about an outcome, not a strategy.
Right.
I want to increase members by 10%. Who doesn't? That's not a strategy.
No,
That's a, what are you
no,
doing? But it is this misnomer that time is linear and that future choice is linear. And neither one of those things is true and has never been true, but it's way less true now. The more hyper complex the global systems get than it was 20, 25 years ago when I just started thinking about these things. And, yeah, it's the time is now. And the
yes,
great thing is I love the amount of people who've told me for years that they could never handle a staff virtually, that it would never happen. They were never going to do it. And all of a sudden, over the last 2 weeks, okay, yeah, they're shell shocked. There's PTSD. There's an emotional grief process, right? There's just all
right,
sorts of things that
right,
they're going through right now. But that realization, if this can, and the United States is going to be locked down to April 30th, and it's going to be repeatedly locked down because infections are going to break out in certain areas when
right,
lockdowns are lifted, right?
right,
So, but they're going to realize, oh my gosh, I can. And I've already heard that from people going, gosh, my millennial workers had been telling me that we didn't need to do it this way. And I am actually finding out that they're right. And it's like, whoa, cool, evolution. But if, yes, once you're through the crisis, once you're through is everybody safe? Is everything done? You're running through your checklist. How are we going to handle payroll? Okay, once you
right.
got through that, it's not time to go, how do we restart the office? It's time to
Exactly.
go, what in the world do we want to be next after what we've learned and what meaning we've made out of the experience we've just gone through? And if organizations could just grasp that, what a moment, what positivity can we bring out of the fear and the grief and the place that we're in as a global society? Oh my God, everybody, we're all in this together. Round rock, spinning through the world, spirits in meat suits, get it through your heads. Okay, now, what does the universe want us to do? And that is our opportunity with using virtual teams and this bravery that we need to have to face that next normal that we have inside of us. Let's just do it. Let's
Well, and
just
it
do it.
well, and you know, I've what you've triggered for me is when I define vision for companies, I don't define it the way most people do. I define it as in the eyes of your future consumers, who do you need to become? Or
Yeah.
in the eyes of your future members, who do you need to become?
Yeah.
And so that's the question that we're asking now. And so these are not sequential steps. These are all in parallel. So, right. So I have to be doing the emergency piece. I always say, you know, it's kind of like if I have a person who's dying on the side of the road and I'm putting a tourniquet on their leg, I'm not going to say, hey, what do you want to become when you grow up? I mean, like,
Right?
really?
Exactly.
It ain't going to happen, you know? But
Exactly.
once they're stabilized, and that's
Yeah.
it, you know, once they're stabilized, then I can start to have these conversations about, you know, are we going to go back to the way we were? Are we going to go back to the way we were? Is that even possible? Or is there something else that's going to unfold? And that's the meaning making at an organizational level. What's that meaning that this all holds for us? And I think we need to be doing that sequentially. So there's like three paths that I see. It's making certain that we're always dealing with this emergency piece over here because things are changing daily with what's going on in the world. Then there's this middle piece of the work today has to get done because we still have to, whatever we're doing, right? Unless we've decided that we're going on hold, and some businesses are on hold, we still have to churn this. But then there's this piece over here, which is what is that step after next? What's that next normal? And what are we going to do right now in this environment to engage, to go through this process of thinking it through? Because we've got, as you've just said, we've been granted another month. I think it's actually my suspicion is it's going to be 2 more months, only because I have to use my my Vegas casinos as my litmus test, because if we're going to bring back the most number of people, you got to go talk to the folks in Vegas, right?
Mhm.
You know, and we keep talking about, first we said, oh, we'll be back by May 1st. We'll start taking reservations on May 1st, but we probably aren't going to let you back till June. Don't know yet, but we probably aren't going to let you back. So I'm saying to myself, it's about a 2 month
Yeah.
period, 2 months more.
Yeah.
Let's use it, leaders. Let's use it to start reimagining where we want to go. Now, for those of you who are on with us today who are individuals, you can do this in your own life because we all need to do this. I'll tell you, at an individual level, you better be reimagining what you're going to become in the future, because what you thought you were going to do might be different, and there might be an opportunity today to actually seize and capitalize on. If you're a leader of teams, you've got to be doing that as well, because maybe we want to say to our bosses when this is all over, we don't want to go back. We don't want to go back. We actually like this environment better. And oh, by the way, if that means that you want to, you know, get rid of the 5th floor someplace and you don't want to rent it anymore, that's okay. I feel for the commercial real estate people right now.
Yeah, exactly. As clients, it's like, I'm really sorry about that, but you know,
Right.
maybe you need less space.
Right. But I think as leaders, do not stop. This is what you say. There's a step before strategic planning. It's called strategic thinking. And there are some structured sorts of approaches that you can use to engage in open dialogue that's divergent, not convergent, to start having these conversations. Because what you don't want to miss right now is an opportunity. Because if you don't have these conversations, and this is sitting right here in front of you, you're going to dismiss it as just being an anomaly, or your eyes aren't even going to see it. What I want you to do is what you talked about was all the possible futures. There are some that are more plausible. There's some that are preferred. But even then, I still want you to know the whole thing so you can track those. But know that you can, you know, with people like you and me and others who are skilled in doing this and have worked in virtual environments, you can do this work. It can happen. And organizations right now, this minute, I know of organizations that are doing it. And so what you have to ask yourself is, do you want to be left behind, or do you want to be out in front? And that's your choice. Individual choice, leader choice, organizational leader.
100%. 100%. And that is a fantastic place We've hit 12:24, so we're just about to wrap up. Lori, do you have any final words that you would like to leave other than those? Because that was fantastic and that does a perfect summation. But is there some final piece that you really want to communicate to people who are on the call right now and who will watch the recording later?
I want to go back to a concept called pause. Um, each and every day, in order to get through this, we all need to pause. We might need to pause on the hour. We might need to pause every few hours. We might need to pause in the morning and at night to regroup, to center and ground. But what we don't want to do on an organizational level is push the pause button for a really long period of time. This is an opportunity. In the midst of this crisis, there is a silver lining. And we have to put ourselves, we have to, I think you said it earlier, we have to be brave enough and courageous enough to step into that. And instead of taking that pause, because I know we're tired, every one of us feel this. I have people who say to me at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I check out. I'm on business calls with people where I can literally tell, in a visual setting, all of a sudden they'll just look at me and go, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I'm like, I got to tell you, this is the second time this week at 4 o'clock you checked out on me. We laugh about it. But I get it. We don't have the capacity, our emotional capacity. And I can say this, I'm a former therapist. It's our emotional capacity is depleted. And we have to go replenish however we can replenish. And so we have smaller gaps of that. But when you've got that energy, start these conversations now. Start structuring them on all these different levels. That would be my final thought, is watch that you're pushing the pause button for too long, or that you're pushing it like this.
Right, like the easy button on tables. Bam, bam, bam. How is it not easy? Oh God, it's not working. Yeah.
And I'm not talking about being a taskmaster here. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about opening up the space and the ability to have dialogue conversations that actually serve you for the step after next.
Yes. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you so much, Lori, for doing this with us. I know we threw at you at the last minute, but you're always game to try something new and have some fun, and your thinking is much appreciated. I've appreciated it in my life. I've appreciated it professionally. I've appreciated it today. So you're phenomenal. And it's been a joy to work with you. For the rest of the audience, my final thought is, take this moment. Take this moment to question. Take this moment to say, what if?
Yeah.
Take this moment to just be and open up the possibilities in your mind that you are working with people, not places. You're centering your business in humans, not infrastructure. Where you can, not everyone can, but in associations and knowledge businesses and service industries, there are lots of opportunities to create a new future. Ubiquity University, this series is over. The Webinars for Good is over. However, stay tuned, because we have a large organizational summit starting on reshaping humanity rising. From different points of view, whether it's economics, whether it's spirituality, whether it's political, whether it's business. Those are the things we're going to be talking about over the next few months, to allow organizations and people to gather around, to not only have these conversations internally, but more importantly, to have these conversations with each other. Because this siloed, I'm an organization unto myself and I have nothing to do with anyone else, is never been true, and it's less true today than it ever was. We need vertical collaboration and we need horizontal collaboration. And so please stay tuned, lots of stuff coming. And we just appreciate the fact that you came by to watch, that you've been hopping onto the Ubiverse. Engage, blog, meet a couple folks, have a better life. That's what we're all about. So thank you very much for being here, and we will catch you on the flip side. Bye.
Bye.